Hello.
Morning or hello.
Morning. How are you doing,
It's morning
Kasper?
for me. Good. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. I'm good. It's lovely to actually talk to you. And thank you for agreeing to talk to us.
Yeah. Good to meet you.
Yeah, probably should introduce myself. I'm Aaron. I'm actually an actor based in London, and I've been a friend of these film awards for a while. Um, and yeah, so I'll be leading us through the next sort of 15 to 20 minutes or so.
Sure.
Um,
Great.
and Yeah, and for the viewers, would it be okay if you could just give us a brief description of yourself and who you are?
Sure. Um, my name's Kasper Kavalaris. I live in Tucson, Arizona right now. I was living in LA, um, working on getting some screenplays picked up, and then the pandemic happened, and I moved here to be near family. Um, The um, the script that I'm here talking about today is Kept, which is a dramatic thriller about a woman who's trying to fix her life and ultimately ends up in a haunted house, and you know everything starts to go crazy. Um, I have been. This is the fifth screenplay that I've written. It's the first one to really get a lot of traction. The first few were just sort of me figuring out the method and all that.
Hmm.
I've been a writer for quite a few years. I really got interested in writing when I was given the opportunity. I'm a visual artist by trade. That's actually my career. I'm an illustrator, storyboard artist, all that kind of thing. And I got the opportunity to illustrate a comic book, and ultimately I asked if I could edit the script, if I could rewrite the script and make my changes to the script, and they allowed me to. And that book won an award, and so I started really getting interested in that aspect of visual storytelling as well. So from then on out, that was about 10 years ago, and I've been 8 years ago, and I've been working more and more in scripts recently, ever since. And of course, recently with this, it's become much more of my main focus now.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. That was beautifully said.
Thank
Um,
you.
uh, so, firstly, massive congratulations on a fabulous script. Like, it's genuinely stunning, and you deserve
Thank you.
all the credit in the world. I have lots of my own questions, but I've been told I probably should stick to some of the questions that they want me to ask you. So I will do a combination of both. Um,
Okay.
so where did this all start for you? Where did this idea enter your life and when?
The idea of Kept, it came to me. So a script for me usually begins with a question that actually I need to figure out the answer to, and it's often just a life question. And the question that inspired the script for Kept was, can a series of really bad decisions lead to a positive result? And for me, I really like to use the script writing process as a way to explore life questions and see where it leads me. So that was the question. And then in terms of the idea, actually, this script was originally going to be set in like 18th century England, and you know
Mm,
there was going to be it was going to be Olivia Beckett was going to be a drug addict who was having an affair with a surgeon, and there was a completely different story, but the soul of it remained the same. I brought it into the present. The point was, you know, a woman involved in things that we would not consider to be above board, but she's got a good heart. She's trying to make changes, and can I write that in a way where you can connect to that character? Really, also for years I've been wanting to write a female anti-hero. I feel like we have a lot of female heroes out there now in Marvel movies and all this kind of thing, but I don't see many female anti-heroes. There's a few. You know, Gone Girl is a good example. She's actually not an anti-hero. She's actually the villain, but she's such an amazing villain. She's almost the anti-hero.
Mm.
So anyway, that was the big inspiration for me. Yeah.
Wow, that was really, really insightful, actually. And you can see it in your, you, yeah, yeah. I can see it in the way you've written it and the way there's a constant questioning of yourself and things around you. I really like that. And what was the kind of, was it, were you able to write it really quickly, or was it something that was, constant editing?
It was very quick. Yeah.
Yeah.
My first feature screenplay, I didn't, it took me like a year to write, but it was because I kept rewriting it, and I was just learning the process. This one took me about 2.5 months to get done, to get the first workable draft done that I was then able to send out to people and get feedback on. And then it was another probably 4 or 5 months of rewrites. I do a lot of rewrites. I think I've rewritten Kept maybe 20 times. So, I do a lot of rewrites, and that's a rewrite is when I radically change the story. I will do sort of partial rewrites, and if you count those, it's probably 40 times. So, but yeah, that first draft I think took about 2.5 months.
Yeah. And what you sent in to us, was that like was that
That
like
was
your
the final draft. That was the last draft. That was after all the 40 or so edits. Yes, yes.
wow? And do you think that because of your history, I know a little bit about you because I get a pack, and and do you believe that your sort of visual history was able to kind of lend itself nicely into your sort of writing, as it were?
Yeah, that's a mixed bag. I think it helps a lot, and I think it also hurt me too, in the sense that, because so the way I write is I just sit there, I see the scene in my head, and then I describe the scene. So I see the movie, and then I write what I'm seeing, and because of that, and because I'm so focused on the visual aspect, um, I had to learn how to actually leave out some of the descriptions. I would put too many descriptions in there. The script, my first script was like 160 pages, and which is obviously just way too long. But it wasn't 160 minutes, it's like a page a minute. It was just because I was putting so much visual description in there, and it's not a fun read. When I started Kept, when I decided to write Kept, I said, I want this to be a really fun read. It needs to be really fun for anyone to just pick up and read. Because my other scripts were kind of heavy, kind of clunky because of how much visual I was putting in there. Because I was really writing it for me. I was trying to notate all of the different aspects that I was seeing. I was trying to make sure to capture all those, and I realized I had to let a lot of that go. So, but at the same time, my visual background, my visual storytelling background, I think helps me a lot, because I personally think that the visual storytelling aspect of film doesn't get enough attention. I think that a lot of writing in film these days tells the story through the dialogue. And there's a lot of story that you can tell just through the pictures. And I think that offloading some of that weight onto the visual storytelling allows for the dialogue to be more light and naturalistic and free, and it makes for a better movie, I think.
Absolutely. I totally, I found it very easy to access your screenplay, to your script,
Right.
which is, I mean, thank you for making it so easy for us. And I was just thinking about sort of your process, as it were. So is it something that you have an idea and then you write a treatment, or are you just straight into, what is it?
Yes. So my process changed a lot over the years. Originally, I had an idea. I wrote a treatment. Actually, the first script I wrote, I was living in Rome at the time. Not that that matters, but the the originally I would come up with an idea. I would write a treatment and a few pages, um, edit that until I felt like it was a solid story, and then start scripting. Um, that was not a very good process because there's a lot of plot and there's a lot of story structure that if you allow a story to crystallize before you focus on the plot and the story structure, then you're really wrestling with it. And that's why it took me more than a year to get that first script done, because I just had to keep wrestling with the structure.
Yeah.
I think the reason this current script took so little time was because I started with structure. So the method, and I wish I could cite the guy's name. It was somebody on YouTube. It was a screenwriter on YouTube who had a method that I found to be valuable. I took it, I edited, I modified it a little bit, but basically, and maybe you'll know who I'm talking about. I wish I could remember his name, but basically, I describe the whole story in one line. So I have to break down the whole story into one line, and then 3 lines, and then 7 lines, and then 15 lines, and then 40 lines. And then once I've got the 40 lines, then that's basically 40 scenes. Those are my scenes. And then I expand out from there. But that first half is actually the hardest part, because it forces you, understanding how to get your story into one line forces you to really get clear about what your story is and what you're trying to say. And then when you do the 3 and the 7 lines and the 15, those force you to really figure out the stakes, really figure out how this story is structured and all that kind of stuff. And that's getting that work done at the outset is like using a scaffolding to build a high rise versus just putting a brick on top of a brick on top of a brick, which could really be disastrous at the end, and require a lot of work to fix mistakes,
Wow. I've never heard of that, and that sounds incredible. And is that a process you're using all the time now? Is that
Yeah, I'm actually coaching somebody else on using that process. I find it to be amazingly simple, but amazingly effective as well. That really is something to that effect. And I will use note cards. I like the low. I write it all out on a computer when I'm actually, I use Final Draft like everybody else does. But when I'm actually working on the structure, when I'm crystallizing the seed of the story, I use note cards. So and not that this matters, but it helps me. I get inspired sitting in the sauna. So I'll actually go to the gym sauna with a stack of note cards and a pen, and I'll sit in there and I'll write I'll plot out my screenplay in the gym sauna. So
yeah, whatever helps you get there.
Yeah, exactly.
You talked about how like you ask a lot of questions about life, and that's kind of what keeps you engaged. And I was wondering, are there ever any days where you kind of just sat there and you're like, I don't want to do it today, or I don't want to do it this week? And what keeps you motivated to keep writing or keep storytelling?
That's a good question. With writing, I honestly feel that I've been writing since I was a kid, but it was always just kind of a side thing. I always felt that I was going to be a visual artist. What I understand now is that both of those things come together to make film. But I went to school for art. That's how, in Italy, I studied in Florence under a master. So that was really what I focused on. The writing came later. The reason I'm saying that is because I actually believe that my fundamental talent is actually writing over art, even though I've spent the last 30 years focusing on visual art. And the reason I'm saying that is because I never have a day where I don't want to write. And I never have a day where writing is very hard for me, honestly. I mean, it's a challenge in the same way that it would be a challenge for anyone to climb a mountain. But writing compared to art, I feel like a professional mountain climber as a writer. And only that means obviously I'm still learning and I'm still pretty new. I've only written a few screenplays, but it never feels very hard for me to
Mm.
manifest what I'm trying to manifest is what I'm trying to say there. Well, what I want to come out ultimately does come out. With art, it's actually more of a struggle, which is interesting since I've spent so much more time on that than I have
Mm.
on writing.
Yeah.
So to answer your question, generally speaking, I almost never have a day where I don't enjoy writing, where I don't feel driven to write, where it doesn't flow pretty easily. And saying that, to use the mountain climbing analogy, there can be some challenges, but if you're a mountain climber, you'd love those challenges, you
Yeah.
know?
You almost search for them in some way, don't you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Wow. What from what I'm getting there is that actually you have real access to this well of creativity that yeah, and it seems to not be blocking you, which is really exciting. Now, I honestly
Yeah.
think,
Can I say one more thing
please,
about that?
please.
Because I think this is important. It took me decades, and I will credit my art pursuits with this. It took me decades to figure out how to access my creativity.
Mm,
It took me many years of work to understand how to capture creative ideas and how to set my life up. And that's really the thing. How to set my life up so that the creativity flows. Because I think that people who have the desire to have creativity be part of their career, um, I think that you have to, at least for me, I had to figure out how to structure my actual life, which requires, you know, doing yoga in the morning, meditation, a certain kind of diet. All these kinds of things are factors that contribute. And if I let too many of those things languish and fall away, then I will notice my creativity, my access to that stuff definitely does wane.
wow. So you, through time and effort, have found your sort of rituals, as lack of a better term.
Yes, there's actually a book called Daily Rituals. I can't remember the author. I think his last name is Mason something. um, something Mason. Anyway, it's a fantastic book. I read it back in 2015. It really helped me. That was when I wrote my first screenplay. Um, he talks about the creative rituals, the daily rituals of all these really famous creative people. Woody Allen, all these people, like, or Woody Allen would take showers to get creativity, like if he was blocked. I don't know why he came to mind. There's so many. I can't remember the poet, the female poet, but it basically shows everybody has a different process. There isn't one sort of creative method that works. But what does come through in that book is it shows how how almost every creative person, like of note, had to have some sort of ritual that they relied on in order to access their creativity.
Yeah. Do you know, my worry is, Casper, is that I think I could probably sit here and talk to you all day. Uh, and now I've got, about 3 minutes or 2 minutes left. And I've got so many questions that I was supposed to ask you. But I guess I'll go with some of the ones they've asked me to ask you, which is, what's coming up next for you? What are you working on at the moment?
Well, the I've got two projects. The biggest thing is the project that is closest to my heart is it's a fantasy, it's a science fantasy, I guess, sort of in the style of Star Wars. That's not a sci-fi and that's not a fantasy. It's kind of this mix. Um, it's that's a sort of a post-apocalyptic story that stars a young boy. I was talking to Netflix about it a couple years ago in terms of it possibly being an animated series, an animated TV series. And then there's been a lot of happening at Netflix recently, so it's on hold. I'm currently thinking about rewriting it to be a feature. Anyway, that's a big project. That's an epic project. That's kind of like my magnum opus, and so I'm not sure whether it's going to be something that happens in the next year or whether it's going to be something that happens farther out.
Yeah.
Um, and then I have a couple other screenplay ideas that I'm currently playing with. But having worked on Kept for a little over a year now with the festival circuit and all that, I am beginning to feel it's time for me to jump back into writing the next thing. And you know, you got to just keep writing. I have so many ideas that I'll never get them all out. So just in this last month, I've begun to transition into opening up to the next screenplay that I'm going to write. It's just a question of whether it's going to be the big sci-fi or whether it's going to be a bit of a smaller character drama like Kept is.
Yeah. Oh, I've got my own personal question. When you start writing and you're like, oh, this isn't working, do you try and fix it, or do you just move away from it and leave it if it, you know?
Okay, cool. I like that question. So there's two angles on that. One is that structure method that I talked about at the beginning. I find it solves 80% of my writing problems in that process, right? And once that process is complete, then I'll say this: when I get to the 40 lines, right, or the 40 note cards, right, when I get to that point, and then I'll spend some time making sure that really sings, as I call it. It really feels like it's crystallized and the story is clear and it just feels like a perfect movie to me. Things will still change a little bit, but once I get it to that point, each of those note cards basically acts as a template for the scene that I'm going to write. So there ends up not being that much of a challenge. Again, it's like climbing a mountain. There's always challenges, but there's nothing that feels catastrophic. And I think it's because I did so much work on the front end. But will you remind me of the question you're asking? When I encounter a problem, what do I do about it?
Yeah.
Or like basically leave it and continue on, or struggle with it.
Yeah.
So Kurt Vonnegut, I don't know if you know about his talking about swoopers and bashers. He says there's two types of writers. There's swoopers and there's bashers. And swoopers will just sort of swoop over the story and they'll just write and they won't worry about the details and they just get all the way through it and then they go back and they fix it. Bashers will bash out every single sentence and they will stick with it until they move on to the next one. I guess I would say the first half of my process is swooper, you know, with all that structuring, just getting all that lined up. And then it is really bashing. Then it is like I do go line by line. But I will say that if I am having trouble with something, sometimes I will jump to another part in the story. But I guess to really answer your question, I find that preliminary structuring method helps me. It really avoids me getting stuck, because it's like I literally have them. Like I will have my computer on my computer. I'll have my screenplay document, and then on the screen next to it, I have my 40 lines, right? And so I'm literally following the map. I'm taking my first line, I'm writing that. When I'm done with that, I'm like, all right, on to the next one. And I guess it's because I'm going scene by scene and I know what all my scenes are. Then it's a smaller problem. So you can't get lost in the park, because you can get lost in a forest, but you can't get lost in a grove of trees, like you can see the edges of it. So I guess that's what I would say.
Wow, you're inspiring me. I might start writing screenplays.
Do it, man.
Maybe. Well, thank you so much for your time. Genuinely, huge congratulations from all of us, and you deserve it. And I really look forward to seeing what happens with you next, Kasper.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you for getting up so early and being with us.
Oh, this is perfect. I wake up at 5 a.m. anyway, so it's I had to meet you at 6, so that was perfect. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, have a lovely rest of the day.
You too. Thanks very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.